Okay, dear friends of Complexity in a Frame, you know that we are an international format. Austria is not big enough for Complexity in a Frame. Therefore, we are proud to present today an Austrian photographer who took photos around the world, from Japan to the United States. Even in St. Pölten, I think he made some photos. You see, he's really an international star. And therefore we make this video also in English. And so I am proud to present here Hans Fleischner.
You want me to speak into the camera, or I always look at you?
Okay, no problem. We look wherever we want.
Because naturally it's like this, no?
Yes, but first
the
of
audience
all,
know.
I addressed the audience. Yeah. So if you want to address the audience too and send greetings to your auntie.
Not necessary. Not necessary.
Okay. The first and classical question: how did you become a photographer?
I should tell the truth, right?
Yes, if possible.
Okay, the truth is, I was really not happy, and I got tired of going to school. And so I turned 16, that was 1964, and I said, I want to go work. And there were two possibilities to learn a trade, so to speak. One was, because of my friends, I have some information. One friend was a photographer, the other friend was an offset printer. Mm-hmm. So I considered these two professions. And basically, really, I wanted to get out of school. I wanted to be among people, and I wanted to have some money in the pocket. And this was the time of starting dates and stuff like that. Right? And with no money in the pocket, it limits the date chances and what you can do, where you can go, and what this kind of thing. So. But my parents were not happy with that sort of decision. So what we did is, in the 3rd district, there was a kind of a youth center or youth advising job center, something like that. And Esteplatz, no, it's a so together with my mother, I went there, and there was a guy there. Today you would call him a coach or something like that, no? But it was a government thing, right? And he made a test with me, the Rorschach test and all kinds of tests. The kind of tests, when you make a driving license, they give you the same kind of test. So he said, well, he picked up on the thing about that I was considering learning photography in a photo studio or something like that. So he says, well, why don't you go to the Grafische, which is a school, which at that time was the only school in Vienna where you could learn photography. I had a long history. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to go to school. He says, look, it's an easy school. you already have 5 years of high school. I mean, in German, we don't say high school, right? What I mean? It's kind of a gymnasium. Huh? So he was thinking, with those 5 years, I had enough education, theoretically, that I could easily pass that school, because that school, the emphasis was not on the, let's say, high school academic kind of thing, but it was photography, practical thing mainly. Right? So he says, no, just try, go there, you'll see. Well, anyway, he convinced me, and I went there and I made the entrance examination, and this was then in 64, and then in autumn 64 I started at that school.
But the level was rather high at this time, as far as I know. It was not easy to make the test. They were strict.
I don't know. Maybe are you mixing it maybe up with the academy or something like that?
No.
You talk about the Grafische.
It seems to be a proof that you really were gifted.
No, you know what I know what you mean. This might have been the case maybe for the graphic artists.
Okay.
That they have to show some drawings. We didn't have to show nothing.
Okay.
We went blank. Everybody who was there was blank, Nobody had a portfolio or something like that, no? Maybe for the graphic artists, it's because the skill is a little bit more complicated in the beginning. So anyway, I started there in autumn 1964, and one thing I can point out where this was really a break for me in a good sense, socially, personally, everything. There were so many different people. And in theory, it was one group, and I can't, maybe we were about 30 people, but I'm not sure, And then in the practical studies, we were divided into 3 different departments, learning the same thing, but it was different professors. Seemingly the professors picked the students who they thought they could shape into photographers or whatever. There was never a discussion. Maybe if my parents would have known one of the professors, they could say, could you please, brother, so that my son can study with you. But that was not the case. So anyway, the nice thing is here we are in a room, like almost 30 people. The youngest people were 14. I was 16. The oldest was 27. And there were people who already had all kinds of different, study situations, some people who had all kinds of work experiences. So we were really fresh, Some people had, if you want to say, a little bit of background. Where I remember one person, her mother was a journalist, so she's a little bit sort of in that environment already. But otherwise, basically, you can say everyone was blank. And that was a nice experience, just being among people that had, and we never spoke about our parents, and we never spoke about where we came from, kind of thing.
It was a totally separated world you lived in.
The focus was photography, The focus was photography. Maybe in some private situation, maybe there was a political. I don't even remember political conversation, And so that was a kind of a liberating experience. That suddenly completely new world, new friends. Some people really became friends, and I'm still friends today. Most people just went into all kinds of directions, so there's not that much contact between the people. Also, they were not all from Vienna. There was also people from other, if you want to say, provinces in Austria, and a very good mixture of if you want to say boys and girls, or you want to say young men and young women. So many different people. That was the main thing. That was a kind of a liberating thing. And so the first few months, we did very basic stuff. Learning how to retouch, with the different tools, like first on paper, then on the negative, and all these kind of things. And then...
So you worked in the dark room? You worked with chemistry?
In the beginning it was not the dark room, we were just sitting there retouching stuff. Okay. Just retouching stuff. And I guess, number one, don't forget this is 1964, and you know how the technology was. Today with the computer you don't worry so much about that, it's so easy to retouch, right? It was a necessary skill. It was a necessary skill, especially if you entered the commercial world, because no matter how clean the studio was, or no matter how careful it was, there's always dust, there's always a little something. So it was necessary to know how to retouch for the job. And in the beginning, nobody has the money to hire an assistant to do retouching. So today you have Photoshop, right? You pay that person full time, and that person does everything, from little retouching to changing all kinds of things. This is 64, right? A whole different ballgame. And I don't remember exactly when I think we started photographing then in the second sort of trimester, which means that was 1965 in the winter. And by that time the moment I started photographing, I was hooked. This was a new experience, and also the important thing is, the retouching thing is not the thing we're saying, oh, you retouch beautifully, or this is a wonderful. you have to please the teachers. But the moment we started photographing, then not competition, but then there is this kind of feeding each other, how you do the light, how you position things. It was, in the beginning it was like tabletop photography. Then we started portrait photography. And for portrait photography, we used these old wooden cameras.
With plates? With plates? With glass plates? Or with...
No, it was already film, not
Already
glass
film.
plates, it was already film. But there was no shutter, so the shutter was 21, 1 second exposure, that was so the I swear, to this date, this experience, also, we were each other's model, right? To this date, when somebody who was a photographer, some friends of mine who would still take portraits of me or so, that experience, this is a camera, big camera, they focus, so you can't just move around, right? Because the focus is very limited, the area. So we learned to sit still, and then they would say, should I make your head like this, a little bit like this, smile a little bit, this kind of thing. So we became like actors, and we learned to control our expression and keep it. Because if he says, yeah, that's good, still he had to put in the cassette, the cover on the lid, open the cassette, and then go 21, and you have to keep the expression, otherwise the shot is gone.
It was a little bit the 19th century experience.
Yes, we really learned traditional portrait photography.
One question this time, did you learn on the basis of photographs from well-known photographers with the photo books you had to look at, or
I can only speak for
teachers show you some photos?
That's why I told you, we were 3 different departments. Each professor had a different approach. I know from other students, photography, their professor was very keen to introduce them to all kinds of things, like literature and art, painting, so he stimulated them. Our professor was very conservative in the sense he said nothing.
Okay.
He was like a Clark Gable kind of guy, tall, handsome guy, mustache, and he was just this kind of elegant guy. I don't remember from him one sentence that taught me anything. The only person I really learned something from was the guy who was doing the immediate technical teaching. Was an older fellow, and he was very careful about talking, but through his presence and the way he looked at your work and the way he saw how you progressed, and if you were lazy, he said, you can do better. He was teaching that way, in a silent way, but he was teaching. And he had, among some of the students, he had a couple of people that he then also, he met them in a coffee shop or something like that. But they were already advanced. Of course, they talked about different stuff. In the beginning, and these 2 guys, one was 1 year ahead of me, the other guy was 2 years ahead of me. They became my friends. But it doesn't mean I was joining, and I was leaving, to the United States, so there was not this sort of continuation. After school, you're doing this and this and that. For me, it was getting out of Vienna. So I really was not happy here, and I knew a lot of people from childhood, and I knew a lot of people now through the but what I wanted to do didn't happen here. So I would have to insert here, because you said books or this kind of thing. One thing, there are 2 things you have to remember. One thing is that you remember that the photography scene, the commercial but also art scene in Vienna, there were a lot of Jewish people who were photographers, who were all kinds of things. These people were gone. So in a natural process, without a war, some of these people maybe would have been teachers, or at least we as students would have known about them and would have maybe tried to work in their studio or something like that, being Jewish or not, just because of the quality of the work they did. And there was a high level of photography here. They're all gone. And the people who were teaching us, they knew that. And they never touched that because they did not want to be asked, what did your grandfather do? Or what did you do? Or what, but
how did you become owner of this photo shop? Yeah, that's quite clear, yeah?
Yeah, so therefore there is this hole, this vacuum, this silence, And what was one of the most educational places for people like me and my generation, if I want to say, growing into the 60s, right? Like 67, 68 and stuff, was this very famous coffee shop in the first district, Havelka. Because Cafe Havelka was, if you want to say, was a meeting place for all kinds of artists. Doesn't matter which area, not just photographers, but painters, and actors, and the writers and everything. And the guy, Mr. Havelka, because many of the people some of them who became even well known and even had a lot of money later on, in the beginning they had nothing. So they paid with their artwork. So you have all kinds of little, no big things, but all kind of, prints, drawings, all kinds of things. So that was the atmosphere that I grew into. And the next thing was that they were, at that time, this was the coffee shop where you would have every magazine, international magazine. And which was particularly interesting for us as, if you want to say young guys learning photography, were of course the journalistic magazines. You had Lifestyle, but you had the other one, the more modern one, Look. And then you had Paris from France. And then you had the culture magazine from Germany, Twin. And the other thing was the fashion magazines. So I remember the two fashion, for us the fashion magazines was like, if you want to say, it was like the Bible, we studied that.
Vogue.
It was Vogue and Harper's Bazaar, these two. Because we could see photography that wasn't happening here. And one also interesting experience was this, maybe it was the 67 or something, was the movie blew up.
Yeah.
The movie blew up, and if you want to say coincidence, there's the scene with the Yardbirds, and Jeff Beck smashes the guitar on, or basically he smashes the amp because he just died. So it's, he just died, and but it's the first time I saw Jeff Beck. And later on, about a year or two later, I saw Jeff Beck in New York at the Fillmore East, together with Rod Stewart, or Rod Stewart together with him, whatever. So the interesting thing was, when I went, and maybe I jumped right away. Now, after I finished school, I finished on my terms. I said 3 years is enough. School was 4 years. The school was 4 years. There was an alternative way. I made an examination so that I got one paper, which then if I would have spent time here, I could also have made the next examination. I had no interest in that. I had plenty of knowledge from these 3 years. I wanted to get out of here. I was looking for jobs, and the way life plays out, I was in Switzerland with a friend for the Christmas, New Year's time, 67, 68. And meeting some people and checking out if there's maybe a chance for a job or something like that. I mean, usually you don't look for a job during the holiday season, but just to find out. So when I came back, I stayed with my parents. Once a month, the oldest brother of my mother would call up and ask us how we're doing and this kind of thing. He lived in Milano, and he was a businessman. He learned his business originally in Zagreb and lived in Croatia. Then the war came. He ended up in an Italian internment camp. I understand he saved himself into the Italian internment camp to get away from the German Nazis, because if the Germans would have gotten him, that's it. The chances to survive was very limited. But the Italians, so he was surviving in an Italian internment camp in Dalmatia, on what today is, which became, was Yugoslavia, became Yugoslavia again. And so after the war is over, he went to New York and worked for a metal trading company. That was his know-how. And the story is long, to make it short. he did a wonderful job for them, and they said, well, what would you want? What do you want? You know, he says, I want to be director of your company in Milano. He spoke Italian. He was happy with Italians, the temperament, everything. It fit to him. Okay, here he is, my uncle living in Milano, and he calls up. So usually it was my mother picking up or my father pick up the phone. It so happens on this fateful day, I pick up. This is in the beginning of January. I pick up the phone. And he says, how are you doing? I said, well, you know, I was just now in Switzerland looking for a job. There was nothing. And I said in German first, and then he says, was machst du im Hungerland Europa? Willst du nach Amerika fahren? What are you doing in the Hungerland Europe? No? Do you want to go to America? I said, yes. I never planned to go to New York. London was an image, you know. I never had this plan with New York, but I just wanted out. So I said, yes. She says, okay, I buy you a ticket to New York. I give you a ticket to New York. It was a one-way ticket. Today you cannot fly like that. It was a one-way ticket to New York, not a round-trip ticket. It was a one-way ticket to New York and $200. So now the first thing was we tried to get a visa for me, a working visa. So we had to make this short. We had a little bit family. We had some friends in New York, my parents' side, but they had nothing to do with photography. I mean, they could have organized the classic immigrant job of dishwashing or.
Well, it's the starting point for becoming millionaire. Yes. Maybe you would have become a colleague of Trump.
Yeah, but I wanted to work as a photographer, right? So they had no connection with that, and I had a connection, which is also several coincidences came together. 1967, I was in London, summer, July 1967, together with one of my schoolmates, and we stayed with my aunt, who was the twin sister of my mother, and so we just absorbed. We were 1 month in London, and we just absorbed London. My friend, he knew a lot about the music scene in London, and it was a great time we had in London. And the last day, well, I said, one more time, we were hitchhiking, right? So before going back to Vienna, one more time, I said, let's go to Piccadilly Circus and just sit there and have the double-deck buses going around us. You know, there was the fountain in the middle. Today it's not like that anymore, but anyway, there was in the middle the fountain, steps, so people were sitting around there, the buses were going around us. It was high time. It was wonderful. So we're sitting there just absorbing this last thing in being in London. Suddenly there's a young woman and a younger boy sitting down. I mean, I say young woman today, but I was 19 at that time. I found out she was probably 16, so something like that. The little bit English I knew, we just chatted a little bit. Turns out she's from the United States, New York. And the typical thing when I leave, I forgot if she left first or if we left first. Anyway, the typical thing she would say was, when you come to the States, give me a call. So I had her address. That was my only connection to personal connection to the United States. And so the moment my uncle said, do you want to go to the United States? And I said, yes. I wrote to her right away. And
it was still the time of snail mail, of writing letters.
Yes. And I was writing to her, I'm coming to the United States. We're looking for this, doing this, you know, to make it short. I had one also fun experience because English is limited, right? She would sign the letter when she wrote me back, Love, Diane. So I did not know this is a standard way of saying like cheers or something like that. So I said, wow, love. So I'm making a joke about myself. I said, I'm not even there yet and I already have a girlfriend, right? So, love, Diane. So I asked her, do you mean no answer? I said, okay. So I don't have a girlfriend. But the key point she made was, come by middle of June. Because then I finish high school and I will go to France to study theater. So that was my focus. If nothing happens, that I get a job, middle of June I have to be in New York. Because she said she has her father has an advertising agent. What I found out later, her father and her grandfather, they were Czech. They migrated to the United States, and they were in the semi-precious stones trading business. So they needed some advertising, a newspaper, and this kind of thing. So this is a real long story, and I've written it, and I don't want to fill up the time with that. I went to New York, middle of June, stayed one night in the Bronx with my aunt and uncle. Actually, it was the uncle, it was the older brother of my mother. And next day, Saturday, the same person who picked me up from the airport would again pick me up from the Bronx and bring me to New Rochelle. New Rochelle sits on top of Manhattan and is a kind of a rich suburb of New York. And that person who picked me up was a friend of my father way back in the 30s. So there was a typical like Vienna immigration circle kind of thing, you know. And so anyway, I went to New Rochelle. She was, of course, there. So there was a party, and that was her sayonara party, no? Goodbye party. And then she went, and I don't even remember every detail on the weekend. I only remember that on Monday, I went with the father downtown. We went to his office, he made some phone call, and we met the advertising agent, who for me, you know, like, he just knew almost all these people who I hadn't seen before in the Harper's Bazaar book, you know. So this was paradise, you know. And he started introducing me to people who had to put, I showed him my pictures. He says, get a portfolio. So I bought a portfolio, put all the pictures in there. I stayed with family, friends in Queens, Flushing, Queens, and just made phone calls. My English, so to speak, became natural because every day I said the same thing. I made phone calls, repeating myself. I'm from Austria, I'm a photographer, and Mr. So-and-so told me I should call you because I'm looking for assistant job, blah, blah, blah. So talking every day the same thing, I gained confidence in speaking. And the education I had in English was quite good. So, and you know, this is New York. Nobody will sort of correct you unless you say something really wrong, you know. The key point is communication, so I succeeded with that.
Sorry that I interrupt, but Austrian and photographer, there were many famous photographers with Austrian background living in the United States, like Ernst Haas, also Ingeborg, Magnum.
Ernst Haas, I knew the name, and then I met him also in New York. You know that you ever hear of Henry Wolff?
Yes.
He was an art director. Henry Wolff was an art director. He's from Vienna. Bert Stern is from Vienna. So Bert Stern I didn't meet. Bert Stern was a well-known fashion photographer. He did those very famous photographs of Marilyn Monroe, you know, with the wind blowing from the.
Because I think in this profession, being Austrian not was a disadvantage. It was nothing very exotic, I think.
No, there was no disadvantage. And you know, this is New York. New York, and it still is like that. You know, I mean, New York became. You can't compare New York today with New York of '68. But the basic spirit in New York is there that they will support you to make your way. You know, I mean, they're not going to carry you, but they will make an effort. Why don't you check this? And if they judge you, or they I don't know what the right word not is, judge you, or categorize you, or look at you in the sense, what is your ability? You know, that's the first thing. If you say you want to be a photo model, they will say you look great. Go for it. Go there. Go there. Go there. If you say you want to be a photo model and you don't look great, they say, well, maybe you don't fit there, but why don't you try over there? There will be a basic positive attitude in giving people support. So therefore, where you come from, it's irrelevant. And, you know, after 2 weeks being in New York, you're in New York. Your accent doesn't matter. Everybody, you know, there are so many people who either don't speak good English or who speak English with a strong accent.
Example, Kurt Waldheim, who even became Secretary General of the United Nations.
Kurt Waldheim is a very special metal case. But you had, at that time already, you had so many Chinese people there whom some of them never left Chinatown. They never learned English. They lived in Chinatown. Right? It's possible to do that in New York. But you had, Eastern Europeans. You had, of course, also Spanish-speaking people. So you had this kind of accent. And then New York, anyway, is its own kind of accent compared to if you're from somewhere else in the United States, they know you come from New York or something like that. I had the funny experience years later. This was in '72. I was on the plane from Tel Aviv to Vienna, and I met a couple of American students on the plane. She was from California. The way I spoke English and the way I was dressed, I had a light gray sweater turtleneck and the kind of glasses that have is a little brown. For her, I was East Coast. She right away thought, I'm East Coast, maybe Boston or something like that. But that's the image. If you're from California, right? That's you don't. So
people have their images in their head. Yeah?
And my English, if anything, was East Coast. It was not West Coast, and it was, And the thing was, because of the attitude and the atmosphere of New York, you very quickly can mix with people, and you very quickly can communicate with people.
So you could find a job?
So what I first of all, maybe a month or something like that, I just was knocking on doors, What I found out later was, you're not looking for a job. I don't know how it is today, but at that time, you're not looking for a job in the summer. You're looking for a job after what you call Labor Day in September. People come back from the holidays, business starts. You introduce that time, and if they want you, I'm sure this is a pattern at that time. And if it was 100% the pattern, I don't know. But anyway, this is what I was told. Then you start working in January. So I can say, this is the funny thing again, I was in the right place for looking for a job, the wrong time. But for 1968 summer in New York, 1968 summer in New York was the right time to be there because of the atmosphere, the whole thing, that's what's going on, the worldwide, and of course that also...
It was a change, it was a time of change and of movement.
There was an incredible dynamic, and so I was there, I was going to Central Park, concert and stuff like that. Just, that was the right time to be there, that's it, So, with or without job, just to be there was the right thing. And
the camera was with you all the time?
I had, initially, I had my first camera that I bought here in Vienna was the Exacta. And at the time I only had a 50. And then I bought the 20mm when I was in New York. Once I got a job, with that job I was able to buy the lens. And so that was with me. But I still was very strong in this sort of hustling state. So the taking picture was not the priority. Getting a job was the main priority. I finally got a job in a movie production, small commercial movie production. And my job there was basically running errands. So I got to know Manhattan really well. They shoot something. This is still 16mm, I think it was 16mm shooting, not 35, I think 16mm. Bring it to the lab for processing. Picking it up, bringing it back to the company. They do all the editing, bring it back, to put the sound on it, all that. So I was traveling all over Manhattan, basically Midtown Manhattan, you can say. And so I got to know the whole scene that way. And I got to know different people again, same age as me, who were receptionists or something like that. So socially it was a wonderful time. And I stopped in that job because I went to Mexico for a couple of months, beginning of '69. And when I really started to work then in New York was spring '69. I came back from Mexico and I called up a guy who I had met summer '68, but he was an art director at the time. So he says, I don't have a job for you, but I will start a studio. I will start photography. So call me when you know. So that's what I called him. He had a studio, 12th Street and Broadway, which at the time was not a photo district, but today it belongs to the photo district kind of thing. And nice big loft. And so I started working with him. And I had essentially the run of the studio, summer '69. Also, the pictures you see in that first book of my retrospective, the studio photos are in that studio. Because in the evening, on the weekends, when my, if you want to say, boss was on holidays, I run that. I was.
You was 21 at this time. 21, 22?
No. In '69, summer '69, I was already 21. Yeah. I became in May. I became 21, '69. And so I had this fantastic studio, and for me to use. The lights he used were not strobes, he used movie lights. So I really made the lighting having from the back, because it was so strong, you wouldn't have the light like that, and there was no diffusion, nothing. So I made the lighting that you can see in the photographs of the book is in that studio, using these big lights, which are from the movie studios. So I did, number one, I did all these studio photos there, and then going to labs for myself, etc. I met a photojournalist, and we became friends, and he took me to the Harlem Music Festival. And that's the pictures you can see, the audience.
Great.
And which at that time I didn't know, but there was people all over. This is Central Park in the Harlem area, not downtown, but not midtown, but in the Harlem area. I can't tell you exactly the street, but still, this is where Harlem was, bordering the park. And it was called, I didn't know at the time because the media didn't propagate this. Now I found out through the photographs. An American woman said to me, "Oh, you were there? This was a famous music festival. This was called the Black Woodstock." I didn't know at the time. At the time when I did the photographs you see in the book, there was a corridor between the stage and the audience. So in that corridor, there was people like photographers photographing basically the music. There was very little police, just spot-wise, a little bit police. And that corridor basically also, I guess, was also to just protect the musician on stage, so there's no problem there. And I mean, protecting in the sense, the audience they were big fans. I remember the main two acts. I remember one was Sly and the Family Stone. I knew that music from the radio, FM station. The other one I didn't know at the time, but he just got me right away. There was Mongo Santa Maria, the Cuban percussionist. I remember Oye Como Va from Santana. That's his composition, I believe. You can check that. I think that's Mongo Santa Maria. Anyway, it was Cuban originally, and I think that was Herbie Mann, but I'm not sure. But he fit into that scene musically, and so it was a great concert. And I was concentrating on the audience because the enthusiasm of the
photographs
I didn't photograph the stage at all. I photographed only the people. Also, you have to remember that I had limited resources.
Of course, because it was the time of working with film. It was
I know for sure it's one roll of film. At the most, it's 2 rolls of films. So I was not in the situation where I was shooting 10 rolls of films, you know, and I didn't have a job to photograph there. I was just coming along with the photojournalist. I never saw his pictures, and I have no contact with him, so I don't know if I have. He's a few times in the pictures. I haven't published those pictures, but maybe through one of these Google face recognition softwares. If I put that in, maybe I find him if he's still. He was older than me, so I don't know if he's still around. You know, but so that was the summer of '69. Was another very dynamic. Number one, because of Woodstock also, that affected the whole, you know, music scene. And the other thing that also was very strongly affected, you maybe know that sort of rock palace, the Filmer East. Filmer East, the guy who did this was a Polish guy originally, and he started Filmer West, I think in San Francisco. Then he came to New York, Filmer East, it was an old movie house or something like that. And in the East Village, you know, and that was a must-go place. So if you came from, that's why I heard Jeff Beck in life. Jeff Beck, it was a concert. It was Jeff Beck with Rod Stewart, and it was Joe Cocker. He was in Woodstock, and then he came also to New York, and. I could hear the creme de la creme of British rock music and of American, you know, then more and more also blues. This place was so famous that Miles Davis, when he wanted to get out of the jazz scene, I said, this guy's making so much money playing concert halls, this guy's making so much money, you know, playing festivals. He convinced the owner of that Filmer East. He says, I can fill that hall. And there's a fantastic, I think it was a 3-day thing. It's a double album kind of thing. Miles Davis at Filmer East. Fantastic music. It's already electronic time, no?
And coming back to your work, in fact, you could make a living of your job in the studio. But on the other hand, you spend certainly a lot of money on buying films.
So I tell you, I tell you my choice.
It was always
the money I
on
made.
The edge, or
no, the money I made, you know, working at the photo studio, I could not have rented an apartment. The most I could rent was a room within an apartment. So a friend of mine, he lived in the East Village. And American fellow, and he says, well, you know, you can have a room in our apartment, costs blah blah blah. I forgot how much, and I said to myself, forget it. If I go there, number one, it's not my place. I'm with people that I only know one guy, I don't know the other guys. I wouldn't have had the money to buy a camera or a lens. Films, forget it. So I just spent crashing. That means, first of all, I stayed in the studio. It was an unspoken agreement between my boss and me. He knew I'm staying there. And he didn't mind because he knows that's security. Somebody is there. And I once, so to speak, helped to save part of the studio. It was raining, and rain down. I think we were not the top flight. It was one, but doesn't matter what. Rain came into the studio. It was flooding. And because somehow, either the noise or something, the noise of the water, I forget what, I woke up and I started cleaning up that, you know. So otherwise there would have been water everywhere, you know. So I was able to control that. So he appreciated it. Unspoken. We never discussed this. And there was an only problem. I was staying in the studio there. Suddenly he comes with his wife. She sees me there. And then he told me, you can't stay here anymore. So I said, forget it. I didn't look for apartments. She didn't want that. They lived out of town. So it was a coincidence that they actually came by there because maybe they went for dinner or something, they came to the studio. Anyway.
This is exactly the point. We will stop now, the first part, because I had the intention to make a video of about 30 minutes, that's the usual length for YouTube, but it's impossible to break the story of a life in a 30 minutes sequence. I think we will make 2 or 3 videos.
No problem.
The first part, working title is Portrait of the Photographer as a Young Man. And I think we will continue.
If you want to start now, we can start with the question, and where did you sleep?
Exactly. This will be part 2. So thank you for watching the first part of this excellent video. Thank you, Hans Fleischner, for this very interesting story, which is in fact not only a story about photography, but a story about living in the 60s, a portrait really of a whole generation. It was extremely funny for me and extremely interesting, and I think it will be interesting for you too. And don't forget my traditional advice: the worst photo you take is the one you don't take. So keep your camera with you and take your photographs, and think on putting up your thumb, and subscribe to this channel, and see you next week or in a fortnight.
I'm here.
Again
I'm here.
with Hans Fleischner.
Okay.